Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com.
Thank you for joining Community IT for this podcast, Part 1. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits. Listen for Part 2 in your podcast feed.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar for May 2019, presented as a partnership between Build Consulting and Community IT Innovators. In this webinar, we'll be discussing the keys to making your nonprofit's technology project a success, and conversely, common pitfalls to avoid. A little bit about Community IT and Build Consulting. We both work exclusively with nonprofit organizations to help them make information technology and information systems decisions that support their mission. And we both take a collaborative approach which empowers our clients to make informed decisions for their organizations. Build leads in the social sector by providing 3 different types of services. We serve as part-time or interim chief information officers for nonprofits. We perform business process technology and data projects ranging from strategic assessments and roadmaps to systems selections and implementations. And we also provide outsourced data managers with deep development operations experience and nonprofit CRM expertise. My name is Peter Mirus, and I'm your presenter for this webinar. A little bit about my background. I have 20 years serving all manner of nonprofit organizations ranging in size from small local nonprofits to large global nonprofits and across a wide variety of industry categories and mission orientations. And over the past 7 to 8 years, I've worked exclusively with nonprofits. In total, I've worked with over 100 clients in both the nonprofit, government, and for-profit spaces. And I have 3 primary areas of expertise, which are marketing, constituent relationship management, and information strategy. So the principle on which Build founded itself is that tomorrow's best nonprofits will use technology to transform themselves and the world. But the reality is that more than 50% of nonprofit technology projects fail. And the reason for that is because the technology moves forward, but the organization does not. And generally speaking, Build's experience is that most nonprofit technology projects fail because of factors other than technology. And what do we mean by that? Simply that in today's market, nonprofits have access to a broad range of quality technology solutions. And there's a good or at least good enough solution for the vast majority of needs. So the challenge that we see in information technology projects is often not the technology per se, but the fact that the organizations do not first identify and then make the organizational changes necessary to successfully select and implement the new technology or make significant improvements or upgrades to their existing tech. So that's why Build Consulting is in business, to try to solve that dilemma. And in response to that, we created something called the Information Strategy Framework. And it really emphasizes that the challenges facing nonprofits in technology today are largely cultural, orienting around leadership and governance, operational capacity, business process, and data modeling before considering technology. And we use this framework to help clients explore these considerations, and we have a white paper available in the resources section of our website called Build an Information Strategy for Your Organization, which you can check out at any time. Now, this is not to say that there aren't technological problems to be addressed, but as one study reported, about 50% of executives said the problem with technology projects was related more to people in the organization. 32 blamed the business processes, and only 19% pointed the finger at technology. And this is fairly characteristic of numerous studies that have been done across a broad variety of industries, including the nonprofit sector. So what Build wants to emphasize is that transformation is critical to your success, and this formula is one that we often show to our clients and when we speak in the nonprofit industry conferences and at individual clients. it stands for old organization plus new technology equals expensive old organization. So transformation is really critical. But what does it mean to succeed with a nonprofit technology project? Well, Build defines success in tech projects as achieving the intended benefits, not just in the short term, but for however long that intended benefit was to last. A project is a failure when it doesn't realize the intended benefits. So, as an example, if your organization implements a new donor relationship management or CRM system for the primary purpose of increasing revenue, and revenue does increase, then the project would be considered a success. If it does not increase, the CRM project is generally considered a failure. So what are the keys to success? That's the topic of our webinar for today. I'm going to briefly talk about 9 different keys to success, 2 which are focused on leadership, then 6 related to operations and operational capacity, and then concluding with an extremely critical key to success that encompasses process, data, and technology. And following that, we should have plenty of time for questions. There were a number of questions that were submitted in advance that I'm prepared to respond to. You can also send in questions anytime using the questions or chat features in GoToWebinar. So the first key to success is having actively engaged executive sponsor or sponsors. And when we talk about executive sponsors, these are high-level people within the organization that can provide visible participation in regular communication and assist with the prioritization of resources towards the effort, providing guidance and support and ensuring accountability. And this is important particularly for major projects that require extensive reallocation of staff time to complete successfully. Now, actively engaged executive sponsors may by itself be the difference between being successful with a project and not in situations like this. And we frequently see nonprofit organizations start with strong executive interaction in the project, but attention wanes over time, and there's a strong correlation between losing that executive focus on the project and the project performance setbacks, because generally speaking, other stakeholders that are involved in the project take their key from executive participation. And so if you'd like to read more on how executives can best support nonprofit technology projects, there's a fairly lengthy post in our blog written by one of our partners, David Deal, who's a lead strategist at Build, as well as an experienced CEO, nonprofit CIO, and nonprofit board member. And one of the reasons why I mentioned that post is because it's often an effective tool for nonprofit staff members getting the right buy-in and engagement from senior execs for their active engagement in projects. And the reason for that is because those execs are more likely to absorb this message we found from someone that has been at their level within an organization than they are to absorb that exact same message from a director, manager, or staff member at a lower organizational level. So I encourage you to leverage that blog post, which you can easily find on our website, as a tool if you need to make the case at the project level for having a more involved and engaged executive sponsor. So we often say in Build that it all starts with leadership, and it is true that many of the challenges that we see in technology in general within nonprofits does ultimately trace its origination back to leadership and the way that leadership leads the organization. The next thing that you want to do is identify business benefits, and this is a great thing for executive sponsors to be involved in deeply. But ultimately, identification of business benefits associated with technology projects should be done as a collective effort, including all the necessary stakeholders. And the purpose of identifying the business benefits is to agree what purposeful or deliberate actions during implementation will ensure that the benefits are realized and sustained once the project ends. So an example of a business benefit would be to achieve a 10% increase in sustaining members, taking another donor relationship management or CRM example. Now, technology can help support that goal, particularly if it predicts which donors will become sustainers and helps automate the outreach campaign process, but technology alone will not address the issue. So purposeful actions during the implementation might include effective training of staff on how to use the features and documenting new business processes to make sure they can be sustainably performed over time and consistently performed, including having the ability for those processes to survive potential employee turnover. So again, you want to identify the business benefit, which would be that 10% increase in sustaining members, which could be one of many potential business benefits associated with the CRM project. And then identify and correlate those with those purposeful actions that you're going to take to make sure that those business benefits are achieved. So the two leadership things that I'm focusing on here today are that executive sponsor engagement, which is so critical, and then dovetailing with that identification of business benefits. Now, one of the questions that I frequently get is who is the stakeholder and who is a project stakeholder? Generally, that means anybody who needs to be involved in the process to ensure that representative input is collected, and in terms of business requirements, which we'll be getting to in a little bit, and also the people that need to be engaged in order to make sure that they're bought into the process so that when it gets to this successful implementation, they have confidence the organization has selected and prepared to implement a technology solution that really is going to achieve the intended result. And that group of stakeholders for the project is going to be a little bit different for every organization, and is something that just has to be considered on a per project basis. We'll be talking a little bit more about keeping stakeholders engaged throughout the entire course of the project in a little bit. The next thing to talk about in regards to keys to success is in operations, and that's project planning and direction. And I think first and foremost what the industry studies have shown and what our experience has been is that experience is key. So especially when you're approaching a large and complex technology project, it's important to choose someone to lead the project that has already successfully performed a similar project in a similar situation, perhaps for your own organization or for another organization in an environment. And empowerment is critical. It's very difficult being an unempowered project director or manager whose stakeholders can feel free to ignore or disregard. So it's very important that whomever is leading the project have the ability to have to really run the project and to have access to that executive sponsor or sponsors that are going to help make critical decisions and then enforce the positive behaviors that need to be in place in order for the project to be a success. One of the primary challenges for project planning and direction that we see in nonprofits is successful time management. Often nonprofit orgs don't really track time. It's not budgeted and tracked for employees or contractors for other projects, and so the result is that the behavior is that all staff time is sort of considered infinitely flexible. So as a consequence of this, staff are often given new responsibilities associated with the technology project, but the managers don't take anything off their staff's plate so that they have time available to commit to the effort. And that basically just results in huge time crunches, lack of bad morale, and a lot of projects underperforming or failing outright. So it's as simple and complex as saying that you have to make sure that the people who are going to be participating in the project have reasonable expectations for their time, and that the managers have cleared the time on their schedule for them to be available to participate. As I said, failing to do this, particularly over large-scale implementations, just leads to incredible burnout, team turnover, and also project delays and missed deadlines. So project planning and direction is key, and the two things that I just want to focus on in this area, although there are many, are experience leadership at the project director or manager level, and the empowerment of that position, and then also successful, good time management. Two critical things that fall under this heading. The next key to success is having a good change management function inside your organization or inside the project. Technology change always requires some sort of behavioral change, and this really gets back to the heart of what I was introducing earlier about transformation being key to success in technology projects. So the practice of change management helps define the change that is coming, assesses the impact of that change on the various roles within the organization and helps prepare those roles for the impact. And, I've been referencing a lot the resources on our site, and I'll continue to do so. We actually have a how-to tool and template for performing a change impact analysis for your project in the resources section of our website, along with the information strategy white paper that I mentioned earlier. It's one of our most downloaded resources. And as you'll see in that template, effective change management incorporates 4 critical elements: leadership alignment, communications, and training, and then also support. And I think in that template, training and support are sort of bundled together as concepts. I'm calling them out a little bit more individually today for the sake of example. And so to give you an idea of how leadership alignment, communications, training, and support would be taken into consideration, I'm currently working on a Salesforce community-based client case management system that's being rolled out to over 10,000, almost 11,000 volunteer mentors across over 300 chapters nationwide. And in that particular scenario, leadership alignment includes not only the leadership at the national office, but also the regional vice presidents, district directors, and chapter leadership. And making sure that those in leadership at every level are aligned to the business goals and performance metrics for the new system is critical. So that's leadership alignment. And then in terms of communications, we need to make sure that the phased timing of the rollout as well as value propositions for the new case management system are understood across the entire volunteership. So all 11,000 or so of those volunteers. We have to provide training to all expected users in the new system. That, of course, is highly important. And we also have to plan for and deliver help desk support to all of the users over the course of a basically 22-month rollout period. So these things, again, leadership alignment, communications, training, and support, need to be taken into consideration for all technology projects, generally from the early stages, when you're doing your strategic assessment prior to selecting the technology that's going to be implemented, because change management is often an under-budgeted for need that's discovered too late. So it's important to get on top of it earlier. So when you're thinking about the cost of the technology project and the resources internally that are going to be required, you can make prudent decisions and really understand the full cost of the effort. So change management needs to be taken into consideration for technology projects of all sizes, even if only in cursory fashion for smaller, simple projects. But of course, the level of change management capacity needs to be scaled to the size of the effort and will be at its greatest scale for the large and most complex projects. And so I think ultimately, for scaling up for the rollout that I was just talking about to those over 10,000 volunteers, that's a significant effort, of course. So we're going to see a growth of maybe 6 additional team members that are exclusively focused on change management to support that effort. I want to take a little bit, still under the heading of operations, about risk assessments. And this is another thing like change management that's often not taken into consideration to help sort of get your mind around everything that's going to be entailed within a project. And risk assessments are valuable all the time, but they're particularly necessary for larger, complex projects. And a good risk assessment basically assesses all of the potential challenges or risks for a project, including each one's source, the probability of its occurrence, and the potential impact on project cost, schedule, or performance. It also introduces a mitigation or response plan for each risk. And it's important to note that a risk assessment is not just a one-and-done proposition. It needs to be revisited and updated to track the status of existing risks and add new risks as they enter the picture. And one example of a typical risk that harkens back to something that I was referencing earlier, and this is true of many projects, is the lack of stakeholder availability to participate based on conflicting priorities or events. And depending on the degree to which this risk transpires, it can have a high impact on all of the areas of potential impact for a risk, which would be project cost, schedule, and performance. And so a good example of how to mitigate such a risk would be to take steps to make sure that team members are freed from responsibilities that conflict with progress on the project. And oftentimes there are a lot of competing initiatives, what we call competing initiatives with technology projects at organizations. that may not even be foreseen as being concurrent with the technology project, but if they run long or somehow or other encroach on the technology project's timeline, that could be a challenge from a time management standpoint internally. So actually, the organizations that do the most effective project and change management for technology projects actually have some form of centralized project management and change management offices or disciplines inside of their organization, or are used to taking into consideration resource management, generally speaking. So risk assessments are pretty important, and they're pretty easy to do. It's just a mental thought exercise and really encourages you to just consider everything that's on the landscape for you in your implementation and not take anything for granted. Also under the heading of operations, another thing that research studies and our own experience has shown is critical to success is taking a collaborative, iterative approach. So this is an approach that's focused on incremental design and implementation processes, and these are most commonly referred to as agile processes. And it's a style of engagement that helps to keep all of the key stakeholders participating throughout all of the many critical decisions in the review and approval processes during a technology project, from the very start of requirements discovery all the way through the post-implementation phase. It also helps break down project complexities into bite-sized chunks so that they can be more easily approached by people that are making decisions. Now, one word of warning is appropriate here. While it is true that organizations that take an open and collaborative approach focused on an incremental design and implementation process or an agile process show greater potential for success, it is important to note that when a vendor is selected to help implement a software system or any technology solution, and that vendor uses an agile approach, that they have the ability to be flexible when working with an organization that has never or not successfully been through a true agile process. Introducing an agile approach to an organization that's unused to working in that style can be a major culture clash that causes projects to get bogged down or collapse entirely. For agile projects, for example, it's very important that stakeholders are frequently available to participate in design reviews and user testing, sometimes on a weekly or more frequently than weekly basis. And this also means committing the necessary time to make business decisions outside of those sessions within accelerated timeframes compared to what the organization is accustomed to. So you really have to be properly geared up for that in order to undertake a pure agile process. So it's really important that the vendor have the flexibility to apply agile principles in a way that will truly work for each organization. And it's kind of like if you're in college and you were in a seminar class and the professor was rigidly operating on the seminar format, and then didn't have the ability to lecture extemporaneously if the seminar structure broke down at any point due to challenges with that particular class. And so things just sort of ground to a halt. So that's the closest corollary that I can think of as an example to what happens when you introduce a pure, rigid, agile process to an organization that's not, or team that's not well suited for it. Things do just sort of tend to grind to the halt, and there can be a lot of frustration involved. So that's something to take a keen eye out for when you're picking vendors. Determine what their implementation process is, and then if it is an agile process, discuss their flexibility relative to your organization's current state of development. Another thing to consider under operations is supportive tools, and successful projects most frequently create a digital project collaboration environment that manages and socializes critical information related to the project. So these are your tools like Basecamp, Asana, in some cases a Microsoft Project or Planner. We prefer a tool called Teamwork Projects because it has a blend of robust functionality and ease of user experience and adoption. It's really easy for us to get client teams into and working with very quickly, although it's not well suited to every situation. The key is to have a functional space that's universally adopted by all the key project participants, and in which folks can be on the same page in regards to milestones, tasks, agendas, notes, files, risks, and critical conversations, basically any information that the project requires to be successful. And the best way to make sure a tool like this remains in active use with up-to-date information throughout the entire project is to use information in the system as a live point of reference within team meetings, and also to drive performance reporting to stakeholders. So again, every organization and team is a little bit different. I'll talk about that more in a minute in terms of project management style. But generally speaking, the best way to make sure that people are in the system and using it and managing the information as they should is to just basically constantly be referencing the information in those meetings, and helping to hold each other accountable for when things aren't up to date or when key information is missing. Now, the last point on our operation that I want to talk about is professional skills development, and this is something that's, again, often overlooked by nonprofit organizations when they're thinking about technology projects. So, technology projects, particularly large and complex projects, often require team members inside the org to step into roles for which they are not fully equipped, just basically because they haven't had to engage in that way before. And the most successful projects take this into consideration and then take steps to make sure the team members are provided with the skills development they require to be successful. And studies have found that special emphasis should be given to planning, communication, teamwork, time management, and change or adaptation skills, many of the things that we've been discussing up to this point in this webinar. And for one major project in which I'm currently engaged, we've taken this into consideration in a couple of different ways. One is I have weekly professional development meetings with the acting VP of technology and the project coordinator, and then also ad hoc meetings towards the same purpose with other team members. And then the VP of marketing and strategy, who is the executive sponsor for the project, also holds regular professional development meetings with other key project stakeholders. So in this way, she and I collaborate to ensure that all of the team members have their heads up when it comes to broadening their individual visions and equipping themselves with the perspective and skills they need, not just to sort of eke out an existence, but more to thrive in their project roles. This is something that we do a lot as far as projects go, especially large-scale implementations that really are all hands on deck sort of processes. And one of the things that we try to emphasize sort of as a motivator for people that have intense project roles is this is really an opportunity for them to grow professionally and boost the value of their resumes. And it really is that. And being involved in a key position in such a successful implementation project is definitely a resume-worthy item, especially given that the failure rate is so high. And successful projects should really be celebrated.
Thank you for joining Community IT for this podcast, Part 1. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits. Listen for Part 2 in your podcast feed.
Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.